What's up everyone, Evelyn is here. She's a crazy DPS and I'm gonna break down how to make her as crazy as possible in a simple manner. So without further ado, the first thing we're gonna discuss is her basic attacks. They're a mix of physical and fire damage, yet on her 5th attack, Evelyn will bind the enemy you're attacking. And when Evelyn binds an enemy, her passive will trigger, which increases her crit rate by a max of 25%. Plus, when an enemy is binded and Evelyn is switched to another character, she'll unleash the non-EX version of her special attack on enemies. And on the subject of her special attack, Evelyn can actually bind enemies with her special attack, so you're not just locked to doing her 5th basic attack to bind enemies. Anyhow, as you use Evelyn's various attacks, she will build up burning embers, and when she has at the very least 50% burning embers, which you can tell when her bar is flashing red, holding her basic attack or special attack will consume all of her burning embers to activate her Garrett attack. Her Garrett attack will cause you to gain 1 burning tether point, and this is really important as when you accumulate 3 burning tether points, the next Garrett attack Evelyn will unleash will consume all of her burning tether points, turning it into her very powerful chain attack. Now this may have sounded confusing since all of her attacks are connected together and working off each other, but trust me, it's really not. All it is that when you attack enemies you build up burning embers, and when you have enough burning embers you hold her basic attack or special attack to perform her Garrett attack. Her Garrett attack will give you 1 burning tether point, and when you have 3, her next Garrett attack will be a chain attack. Now, there's a great way to build a huge amount of burning embers, and that's through the use of her special attack. If Evelyn uses her special attack just before she's hit, she'll perform a perfect dodge and in turn, gain massive amounts of burning embers. Next up, let's talk about her ultimate. One cast, it'll deal very high fire damage, as well as put Evelyn in the Dance of Awakened Fire state. This state is really useful as when Evelyn consumes 3 burning tether points to unleash her chain attack, she'll now keep 1 burning tether point, meaning that you only have to build 2 burning tether points, and thus you can perform her chain attacks much more often. As for her additional ability, it's very important and ties into her passive. So when you play Evelyn with a stunner or support, her chain attack and ultimate damage increases by 30%. This is really nice. However, if her crit rate is at least 80%, which her passive will help you to work up to, her chain attack and ultimate damage is further increased by 125%. This of course is huge and will result in a huge damage increase, so you absolutely want to take advantage of this ability and at least have 80% crit rate on Evelyn. With this in mind, when you're leveling her abilities, as always, level her core skill to the max, and then prioritize both her basic attacks and ultimate. Next up, level her special attacks, and for the rest of her abilities, you can ignore them. Next, let's go over which are the best engines to use on Evelyn. Given the things we just went over, crit weapons are going to be very valuable. So of course, Evelyn's signature engine does just this and much more. In addition to high attack and crit rate, her signature increases her crit damage by a huge amount. Plus, when Evelyn enters the field or does the stated attacks, the fire resistance of enemies is shredded by a max of 40%. All of these huge buffs make it out to be Evelyn's best engine and by a huge margin. Nevertheless, Ellen's, Harumasa's, and Zhuyuan's signature engines are also effective. They're definitely not perfect engines for Evelyn, but they remain as quite good options because of their high crits. Other than them, the next best option is the Brimstone. It lacks any sort of crit buff, but it's redeemed through the tons of attack it gives, which Evelyn can absolutely use. This brings us to the A rank engines, and overall, any attack engine will be good. So for example, the Starlight engine and the Street Superstar are both good, especially if you overclock them to the max. The Iris Enigma should also be effective, even though Evelyn's EX special attack isn't the most important attack of her kit. Another bunch of strong A rank engines is crit rate engines. The recent event weapon, the Mercado Desire, is a good generalist option. You have both crit and attack, and whenever you trigger burning on enemies, you'll gain some extra attack. Similar to the Mercado is the Cannon Rotor. The pro of the Rotor is that its entire passive perfectly applies to Evelyn's kit, but it's locked behind the Battle Pass. If you have any of the A rank engines I mentioned, I recommend that you don't buy the Battle Pass since those engines are very close and in some cases even better than the Rotor, so it's not really worth it. For any of you in early game, you can equip any of the 3 B rank lunar engines. Now I'm gonna get into Evelyn's drive discs, and this portion of the video is pretty important because there's many sets that Evelyn can be played with. However, most of them are situational, so her best set is mostly gonna depend on how you play with her. Overall though, Woodpecker Electro seems to be her best generalist set. With the 2 pieces crit rate, you're getting help to achieve that 80% crit rate, and then its 4 piece gives a 9% attack buff for whenever a crit lands on an enemy, which, considering Evelyn will have a high crit rate, will be very easy to do. So if you're not sure which of the sets you should use, you can safely use this one. Alternatively, there's Infernal Metal that gives fire damage and a huge 28% increase to crit rate. This massive buff would make building her incredibly easy, but the caveat with this set is that the crit buff only triggers when a burning enemy is hit, which though Evelyn can absolutely do, because she's not Anomaly, this will take a long time to do. As such, if you go with this set to have a good uptime on the set's buff, you need to play Bernice in your team. Finally, there's 4-Swing Jazz. This set is commonly a support one, but it is actually usable on Evelyn because she will frequently use her chain attack, especially if you pair her with Astrael. But the set's DPS buff is only the damage percent it gives, so it is worse than the last 2 sets, however it is still usable. For the 2 piece to pair with either of these 4 pieces, you can use Woodpecker Electro for extra crit, Blade Song for crit damage, Buffer Electro for pen, Astral Voice or Hormone Punk for attack, and Infernal Metal for fire damage. As always, you can also use any 3 of these 2 pieces if you don't want to use a 4 piece. When equipping drive discs, for the 4th slot have either crit rate or crit damage. To achieve 80% crit rate with their max score skill, you need to have at least 55% crit rate, so that 25% crit rate from her core skill will turn it into 80%. 55% will be very easy with crit rate, so it is the best, but if you already have 55%, then crit damage is better. For the 5th slot, go for fire damage, attack percentage, or pen ratio. And lastly, for the 6th, use attack percentage. When it comes to substats, aim for both crits, attack percentage, attack, and pen. Now let's move over to Evelyn's Mindscapes. Even though she's incredible at M0, she really has some strong Mindscapes that would be good to actually pull or, hopefully for my case, accidentally get. Take for instance her M1. At the beginning of a fight, it gives Evelyn 1500 decibels. M1 also reduces enemies' defense by 12% through the effect called Bound. This applies to the one enemy that you bind in addition to all the enemies hit by her special attack. At M2, Evelyn gets an attack increase, but the big star of this Mindscape is its second effect. Now, whenever Evelyn consumes Burning Embers for her Garrett attack, that amount of Burning Embers is actually returned, so overall, playing her will be a lot easier and you can work up to her stronger attacks much faster. M4 provides an interesting but still really nice effect, whereby Evelyn gains a shield with the use of her chain attack and ultimate. But the Mindscape would be lacking without any insane damage increase, so the shield also increases her crit damage by 40%. Lastly, her M6. M6 will put into play the Shadow String effect, which is activated with either her ultimate or chain attack. The effect makes it that whenever Evelyn hits a binded enemy with the stated attacks, she'll perform a Garrett attack that deals a massive amount of fire damage. This attack is counted as a chain attack and can be done 16 times. Finally, here are some great teams to play Evelyn in. First up is probably her best team with Lighter and Astrael. Being an attack unit, Evelyn will greatly benefit from the extra stun damage stun units provide, and for her, there's no better stunner than Lighter. His mechanic of reducing the enemy's pyro resistance will be very handy. Evelyn will be exceptional, especially when paired with Astra. Astra's gonna give all sorts of really useful buffs to Evelyn, causing her damage output to be very impressive. Another really good team is a burning team with Bernice. Here Evelyn is going to be running for Infernal Metal, and she's going to make great use of it with all the burning Bernice is going to enable for. With such high crit, Evelyn will barely hit a non-crit, and she will make full use of her additional ability and ability buffs. In the 3rd slot, you can either run Lucy for extra damage and an attack buff, or a stunner to have Evelyn's and Bernice's damage significantly higher. For those of you wanting a more free-to-play team, next to Lucy, Sukaku is going to be an amazing support to pair with Evelyn. Her massive attack buff will virtually double Evelyn's damage, and next to Sukaku, you can play a stunner like Anbi, or if you're lucky enough to pull her in this patch, Ching-Yi is also exceptional because of the huge stun damage she'll give to Evelyn. Well everyone, this is my Evelyn guide. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to ask me any questions you have on her in the comments. Thanks for watching.